Hi everyone, welcome back. So today we are talking about intonation. What is it and how do we practice it, and more importantly, why should we practice intonation? So intonation is the playing in tune with another person, basically making two sounds sound as harmonious as they possibly can, whether we're talking about a unison or we're talking about a chord. And I think it's something that players should practice every day, and it can be a little bit tricky, and so I'm going to show you a way that maybe will be helpful for you in terms of practicing this. I've got a couple tools I'm going to show you here. So we always want to make sure that we're playing in tune. It's very normal, unfortunately, especially in more, let's say, amateur, if you're high school, middle school, sometimes college, some community ensembles. It's very normal. I play my B flat, I tune my instrument, hopefully, and then I forget about it for the rest of rehearsal. That's not awesome because we always, every time you're playing, and you don't just play one chord throughout the entire piece or the entire concert, you play many chords, and you always have to be adjusting them. Now, with a caveat that sometimes things are really fast and you don't have time to hear and analyze and think about it. But if you play something slow and melodic, you always want to make sure that you're coming back to a normal, a well-tuned center on it. So there are three basic steps that I use for tuning. Number one, when I tune, I get my instrument to the right length. And that's the very first thing we do in rehearsal, right? We're going to use a concert B flat today. I'm going to play a concert B flat with my ensemble or an A, and we get our instrument to the right length using the embouchure that we use and the setup that we use. So I'm playing, this is an R13, Buffet R13. I'm playing a 67 millimeter Hadash barrel. I've got a Brad Bain, I think it's the number 3 facing Zinner mouthpiece, and I've got a 3.5 V12 reed on my mouthpiece. This setup is very comfortable for me. It gives me a lot of flexibility. The reed's a little bit softer than I would use if I were playing in a larger room or a larger setting, but for today in this room, it sounds and feels pretty good. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tune my instrument. So I've got my tuner on my stand. There's the little wheels going around. I get the needle to stop in the middle. Okay, I'll show you what I'm using here. This is a Peterson Strobo Plus HD. It's a very fancy metronome that my sister-in-law nicely gave me. Any basic metronome, tuner, any tuner that you have on your phone, almost always will work okay. I don't love the ones that clip on, that work on vibrations, because sometimes I feel like those don't really teach us to play very well in tune. They might be right, but I don't always, there are better choices out there. So whether you have an app or you have a device, find a tuner, figure out what you need to do to play in tune with a nice, comfortable embouchure. Okay, I'm not consciously manipulating the pitch at all with my embouchure or my tongue position or even different fingerings. So let's talk about that for a second. So the first thing I do, step number one, is I tune my instrument. I make my instrument the right length. Once my instrument is the right length, I leave it alone as long as the room stays about the same temperature. If you have a good quality professional instrument, once it's tuned, it should be fine until, again, if it gets really hot in the room or really cold, if you play outside concerts particularly, fine, things are going to change a little bit then, but mostly those things are going to be pretty static if you have a good quality instrument. If you have a lower quality instrument, they tend to go out of tune pretty quickly. Okay, so instrument is the right length. Check. Step number two is, as I'm playing throughout the course of a rehearsal, I will be consciously listening and asking myself if I need to adjust any of my pitches to make it so that the people I'm playing with, my colleagues, we are more in tune. If there's something I can do, that saves a whole conversation about, hey, can you play that a little up? Can you play that a little down? Sometimes there's something you can do, and sometimes there's not. Just depends on a couple of things, but mostly it depends on where the note falls on your clarinet. If you're playing like a low E or a low F, There's very little I can do about that. And Buffet's kind of taken that into consideration a little bit on some of the Tosca models. I think all the Tosca models. They have an extra key that'll raise up the, I believe it's an F. I don't know Tosca, so I'm speaking from just seeing my friends' instruments. But it'll raise up the pitch a little bit, and it's a little bit awkward, but if you have something that's slow, I'm sure that is a helpful tool. One thing to be careful of too, and you can't really see my legs in this video, but if you're playing especially a low E, be very mindful that you're not putting your instrument on your knees, because your body becomes part of the instrument and it makes it really flat. So having your instrument away from your body as much as possible, and then trying, again, low E, low F, there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes you have to play a really high fingering, and there's just nowhere you can go. But most of the rest of the fingerings, we've got a couple other ways we can adjust them. So the first thing is I can use a different fingering. Is that an option? So most of you know we can play E flat. I play E flat mostly like this with side key plus these two. But if that for some reason isn't working out to play in tune, I will play E flat like this sometimes, or I will play E flat like that sometimes. It just depends on the context. So that's step number 2. I'll use a different fingering. Step number 3 is the least predictable and definitely the fastest to fix, but I can't make a note in my part about how far. So the step number 3 is I use my embouchure to adjust the pitch. And some notes are really flexible. Like I can bend an F pretty far. If I have to bend that in a hurry, I've got quite a bit of range I can do them. But like a low E, I can do very little about that note. And it just depends on the pitch that you're talking about. So my favorite way to adjust a pitch is if I can write a different fingering in my part and remember to play that fingering for them. The second thing I'll do is if I need to do what I just did, I'll put a little up arrow or down arrow to remind myself to play that sharp using my embouchure. And that's fine as long as you've made that sort of note that's how you're going to do it. But I definitely prefer to use the fingerings first before I start messing with embouchure, because it changes the tone, and it's really hard to gauge how far to play that down if you have to do it in a hurry without a second to kind of hear it. So, whereas fingerings, you can play the same fingering every time and it'll be consistent. Okay, so I use 3 different ways of tuning. Okay, well, now let's talk a little bit deeper here. Not every chord is going to, actually no chord is going to sound in tune if you're just looking at the tuner. And I think this is sort of a lesson that a lot of particularly younger students struggle with, in that we actually, to play a chord in tune, I actually have to manipulate, let's say I'm playing a triad, so like concert B flat, concert D, and concert F, or a C, E, G for clarinet. I actually have to manipulate the middle 2 of those to make them sound in tune. And that's a little bit tricky, because how do I do that? Why do I do that? So what we're talking about is called just intonation. Okay, we have, a long time ago, they decided that to make keyboard instruments work well, they needed to divide an octave into 12 equal parts, right? Because we have 12 different scale degrees in a chromatic scale, right? So they decided that they wanted to make a keyboard work very well for that, so they're all the same amount apart. Well, that's fine, and it works great for keyboards, but our instrument's kind of built like that. Everybody's instrument has notes that play sharp or play flat, but we actually have a need and an ability to play chords that sound much more in tune than a piano ever can, assuming it's well tuned. So the just intonation is what this is called. And so what we actually have to do, so if I'm going to play, let's say, a C major chord on clarinet, C, E, G, I actually need to make the 5th be 2 cents sharp. And that sounds really, really weird when you're looking at your tuner and you're thinking, boy, I need to make that sharp. But if you've ever played in Europe or played somewhere in America, we tune to 440, right? But if you've ever played somewhere else, well, then you find that most of Europe turns to like 442. Okay, so you feel very flat. If you're playing, let's say you're right in tune, you feel very flat. Okay, so we actually, to make the chord what I call is lock in, feels like all the notes, you don't hear any of those wobbles in the sound. To make that lock in, you actually have to play it a little bit sharp. Okay, and that can be a little bit tricky at first. What I want to have you avoid from this video is it's not about the math, right? I can go through and I can say, okay, the 5th needs to be 2 cents sharp, the 3rd needs to be 14 cents flat, right? But when I'm playing and performing, I don't want to think about all that. I just want to think, is it in tune or is it not in tune? Does this sound good? Does it sound locked in? If it doesn't, then I need to be able to adjust it and kind of know which way to go. But I don't really want to be thinking like, I have to play this flat and I have to play this sharp, and it's too much brain work. There's too many other things going on. So my instrument's tuned. Now I'm using my ears to practice. And this is where we're going to kind of get to the stuff. I have a couple things to show today. The first thing to look at, you should have a tuner, right? You should have a tuner, whether it's an app or a box on your stand or whatever. A tuning fork is not super ideal, but fine, a tuning fork. Have some way of gauging where you are for pitch. Okay, I have a tuner on my stand, and I know when I'm in tune. I turn it off. Once I get my instrument to the right place, I turn it off. And then I realize, I know that I need to play with everybody else. It doesn't matter what my box says. I worked with a band one time where they had a video camera positioned above a tuner at the beginning of the room, and they'd go down the row and everybody would play their pitch, and they would all lip it up or down to make it lock in, to make the needle go to the middle. While that's good for flexibility, that's really bad for listening and developing your ears. So here's what I do. I found a number of years ago, one of my band directors introduced us to this thing called the tuning CD. And the tuning CD is definitely not new, and it's definitely not even a CD anymore. It's just, for me, it's a bunch of audio tracks on iTunes, and like $10, and I use it every single day. So what I do is I put the tuning CD on a big speaker, and what I do is I try to play. First one I'm going to do is going to be concert B flat. I'm going to play my concert B flat, that concert B flat, try to make those lock in the same. It's a lot like if your tuner does a drone, but the tuning CD actually has a fun little feature that the basic 12 notes actually have the 5th on top of it, and the 5th is tuned using just intonation. So it's actually 2 cents sharp. And so everything feels like it locks in a lot better once you get it. So here's the tuning CD. I hope you can hear this. Pitch to pitch. Oops, everything's falling out. My B flat to that B flat. I'm gonna pause it here. Now that's great. I hear that's just like tuning in band at the beginning. I play my pitch, I hear my pitch, go. We're good to go. After that, I like to make a little game out of this. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the root, the C. I'm gonna do the G on top of that. And I'm going to mess around with where the G is to kind of find where this G should go. So here's the pitch again. C, I added some extra fingerings. I added the ring finger, and I added the C key, and I tried to mess around with where it is. And when I added the ring finger, it was too sharp, right? But when I lifted it up just a little bit, it got to a place where it locked in. And one of the things about this is you will start to hear other notes in the sound. Okay, you're going to hear the overtones popping out. If you're playing it in tune and everything's locked in, you'll start to hear sometimes you'll hear the octave below, which nothing's actually playing that, but the vibrations make it so that you hear that. Sometimes you'll hear a partial above that. It just depends on the instrument, and it depends on whatever your partner, or if it the speakers that you're using. So I'll play the root and I'll play the 5th. The next thing I'm going to do is sometimes I'll put the 3rd in there, and I'm going to see, like I said, you have to play it flat. So how flat do I need to make this? Well, let's try that again. I'm going to play the root, the fifth, and then I'm going to play the third. When you get to the sweet spot, you will hear extra notes come out, and it locks in. That's really the beauty of this. So the other thing I like to do with this is I'll make up little songs. Simple Gifts works really great because you've always got that sol-do relationship that you can use in there. Make up a song. It doesn't matter what it is, but every single note has the possibility of locking in against that drone. And when you do it, you start to listen to, well, I have to move that one a little bit this way, a little bit this way. It just depends on your instrument, depends on the player, depends on the chord you're playing. But then you're listening for it, and you're not just going off the tuner. And that in itself is really worth watching the whole video here. So I'm going to do it again, and I'm just going to play a little song. I'm going to tune each pitch. Play more, I notice my instrument is going a little bit more sharp, so I'm going to adjust. My instrument's been sitting here in my room, my office, getting a little cold, so it's warming up to pitch. But you hear every one of those I can adjust. Now, here's the tricky thing. A lot of students, particularly, professionals too, don't have the flexibility in their embouchure to move every pitch around. And that's where this can be really hard to practice because they say, well, maybe they hear that it's out, but I don't know which way to go, and I don't know how to do it. I want to show you, here's something I've been kind of messing around with. You go down to your music store, and for $6, buy one of these. This is called a slide whistle. Okay, if you have never seen one, it's usually kind of a comical thing, but the people that tend to have the best developed ears are trombonists. I don't know if you've noticed that, but trombonists can make these little micro adjustments to their slides, and they can lock up, especially a trombonist with a decent ear can hear that and lock it in. Singers just do this naturally. They don't even, they don't have keys or reeds or things like that to mess with. If they've got good control of their voice, they'll actually just start to adjust those chords on their own. And that's what this is all about, really. We want to, in everything we do, we want to try to sound more and more like a singer. And you'll find that some of the best vocal ensembles, they're always just making those little adjustments. The really good vocal ensembles, they'll start on a pitch and they'll end on the same pitch and it'll be identical. So get yourself a slide whistle. It's a fun little game, and that's why I'm doing a B flat today, because my slide whistle doesn't go down to concert A. So I'm going to use it goes down to a B flat. So I'm going to use my slide whistle, and first thing I'm going to do, just like I was doing with the clarinet, is I'm going to find where the root of the chord is. Once you've got that, find where that is, sit on that for a while. The problem with most of the slide whistles is they're kind of toys, right? And so this one is really kind of touchy if you don't have, I'm putting it against my teeth, and I'm sealing my lips like I would to play, but just on my lips it moves around too much and it's not stable enough. If you also play trombone, use your trombone to practice this, because this is like the perfect instrument for it. So anyway, I find the root, and then next thing I'm going to find that fifth. So, so I want to hear that in my mind, or as close as I can get to it, and match it. Now, while I'm doing that, you'll notice the track is a little bit about my setup here. I've got the track on loop, so it always does that one that one pitch over and over again. There's always just a little break. But that's how I practice this. I'll put this on, just put it on loop, and I'll just play for the full value of the track and however long it takes to get to 5 minutes. So the next thing, I find where that G is, right? And I want to make sure that I can lock that in. And I'm going to do it again this time, and I'm going to intentionally bend it up and down a little bit just to show you. You'll hear a spot where it locks in. And you can do that with every pitch. So do that with the third, do that with the fifth, make up a song. But finding, with this one, because the drone is playing the concert B flat and concert F, it's much easier to find those two. But the cool thing about the tuning CD, and I'll put a link at the end here, the tuning CD has all 12 pitches that are tuned exactly the same way, plus another like 12 tracks of like major seconds, minor seconds, major thirds, minor thirds, perfect fourths, for I think it's C, C sharp, and D, and all based on theirs. So you can really tune just about any interval and listen for it. And I do a different one every week. So when I first started doing this, I would do A, and I'll just play A the whole week for 5 minutes a day. Then I'll go do, go to the next one, B flat. Okay, great. And spend a week on it so you really get comfortable and you really get to know where your instrument is. Then the next time you're playing in your ensemble, listen for what do you need to do to make that work so it feels like you can get back into tune. The more of these you do, obviously, the more comfortable you'll be with it and the more flexibility you'll have in your sound. And then you can start to lock that in against another person. I found the easiest way to practice this, the easiest way to hear if you're in or out of tune is to play with an instrument similar to yours. So clarinets to clarinets, not recorded drone sound to clarinet, but with a little practice you'll start to hear it. As you add more instruments, more, piano is one of the harder ones to play with because each note has 3, sometimes some have fewer, but like we'll say 3 strings. So you're actually hearing 3 different pitches. Even on a really well-tuned piano, you're still not quite sure. You practice it, work on it, but you're always just a little bit, which one am I listening to? So anyway, that's how I practice intonation. It's, sorry, a little more talking than usual on this video today, but it's really an important skill, and it's not just about making the tuner go to the middle. It's about developing your ears to have a good sense of where you need to be on any given chord. So there are a couple resources I'm going to recommend here. I'll put links at the end. Tuning CD. It's on Amazon. You can buy the MP3s there. It's on iTunes. That's why I bought them there. I think it's even on YouTube if you want to just perpetually bring your laptop or pull that up. Have a good tuner, of course, any sort of app on your phone. And then, like I said, go down to your music store, this was $6. It's a toy. If you want to spring for a really nice slide whistle, I bet it's a cooler. I bet it works better than mine. And I bet the tone is better. And that's one of the things I found is that the tone doesn't quite match up super well because it's kind of airy. It's a toy. It was $6. But it's a fun little practice tool to help you kind of figure out where those pitches are. But spend the time every day to practice and listen. And as you do these with the tuning CD, start to listen for extra notes in the room. There's another link, and I'll put that up at the end. Or maybe I'll put a little link at the bottom down here if I can figure out how to do it. The Titchener training, I believe that's the guy's name. They did all these scientific experiments. There's this very detailed webpage about hearing sounds and hearing resultant tones over the top of it. That's exactly what we're talking about. When we play in tune, we should be able to hear the full spectrum of the chord, not just my note and the other guy's note. So, as always, if you have questions, let me know. send me an email, joshuamietz@caspercollege.edu, and I'll be happy to answer those for you. Do your best with it and let me know how it goes, and good luck. Hopefully this helps and you can find your playing in tune a lot easier than you have before. So thanks for watching. See you later.